Hey everyone, I'm going to walk you through what we did in social studies on Thursday and Friday this week, October 1st and 2nd. So under today's lesson plan, we went to the slideshow and we talked about a few different things in here. So I'm going to show you that first. Students were given time to finish up. That's not the right slide. We went over the slide requirements, and students were given time to finish the slides that they had to work on and that were needed to be ready to present later this hour. So we talked about, again, the requirements of each slide, which we've gone over prior class before as well. So the 5 bullet points, summary in your own words, an image, has to look organized, has to have your name, needs to cite its sources. We talked about what exceeds mastery looks like versus near mastery and beginning level. So exceeds mastery is everything is accurate and in depth. All information's well organized. Mastery is you've got it correct, maybe not quite as in depth, but again, well organized. Mastery is you've got most of the stuff, but I probably have to step in and provide some other information. I need to give you some advice on how to finish that up and to add the last pieces. And maybe it's not as well organized. And beginning level is you're just missing some information completely. After students had about 10 minutes to work on this, we then got ready to present. And so page 7 in your Civics digital notebook, looks like this image right down here. I'll make that a little bit bigger for you. Deals with the legislative branch, which is what we presented on and had students share about today. So they talked about the legislative branch and what they needed to do there. So as people were sharing, they completed this page in their notes. So one person was presenting while the other 20-some people in class were getting these notes in their notebook. There's a video here. This is available to you. One of the questions is about how a bill becomes a law, so you can click and watch this video at any point you'd like. And then we played a Kahoot as well that is public, so if you'd like to go play that Kahoot, you are welcome to go play that Kahoot and just test yourself on how you understand the legislative branch. Now, making a few adjustments here. Again, the slide requirements. We started then presenting on the legislative branch. So, the first question that students need to cover was who makes up the legislative branch and how are they chosen? And you can see as the student created this slide, the legislative branch is also called Congress. So you'll hear us refer to them as Congress. And they're made up of 2 separate houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So the House of Representatives and the Senate are the 2 different branches of the House. To be a member of the legislative branch, you are elected into that position. So we as voters in the state of Wisconsin elect a representative or our representatives, and we elect our senators. And for the House of Representatives, they are up for election every 2 years. And for the Senate, they are up for election every 6 years. So this nice little graphic over here gives you some more information as well. 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate. 2 years is the length of the term. So they are in office for 2 years, but then can run for re-election as many times as they want. The minimum age is 25. And it's decided by population. So each state has a different number based on the population in that state. So some states have a very high number. For instance, California has like 55 representatives, whereas North Dakota has 1 representative, because California has a very large population and North Dakota has a small population. The Senate, on the other hand, every state has equal representation. So in the Senate, every state gets 2 representatives, 2 senators. It's a ton of information. The student that created this probably went overboard and got more information than they needed, but they have a lot of good stuff here. So what does the term bicameral mean? And it says right up here in the very first sentence, the term bicameral means 2 houses or 2 chambers. So our legislative branch is bicameral because it has 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So anytime you see that word bicameral. They're just talking about something that has two branches, two chambers. Okay. We've talked about what the two branches are. We've talked about how many members are there again. So remember, 435 members in the House of Representatives and 100 members in the Senate. So again, that's decided. The Senate, every state gets 2, and in the House of Representatives, it's based on population. So more populous states get more representatives, less populous states get less representatives. So what can this legislative branch do? They're responsible for making the laws. So if there's one thing that you remember above all else, is that the legislative branch makes laws. They lay out the formats when we think about healthcare changes in our country, when we think about pandemic and stimulus checks and stimulus packages. They're the ones that put together the laws around that. They declare war. So ultimately, if we do go to war with another country, they are the ones that declare war. That gets a little sticky with the executive branch, and we'll talk about that when we get into the executive branch. They make sure the laws are applied to all 50 states equally. They're also in charge of taxing and spending. So when you pay your taxes, they're the ones that ultimately get all that money and decide how to spend that money. In recent years and in recent decades, we've spent way more money than we've got brought in. So we've spent more money than we've collected through taxes. I think that's a good chunk there. The legislative branch can also restrict other branches. So they can override a decision of the executive branch. They can override the decision by the president to do something. Okay, so if the president decides that something's not going to be a law, they can decide to overturn that. They need 2/3 of the legislative branch needs to vote in favor of it, but they can overturn it. They can impeach the president. They can impeach the legislative branch. The judicial branch. So that means they can remove them from office if they've followed all the steps. They can also confirm and deny Supreme Court justices and presidential nominations. So if the president wants somebody in a position, the legislative branch can deny that if they don't think that person's fit. And the same with the Supreme Court. If they don't think a Supreme Court justice is fit, they can remove that person from office by impeaching them. They can also just reject their nomination in the first place and not allow them on the Supreme Court. We got into what happens and how a law becomes a bill. So a bill becomes a law. So I would watch that video I showed you earlier and showed you where to find that. It kind of walks you through it. But essentially what happens is a law or a bill is introduced. Somebody says, we think this should be a law. So they will introduce that to the House of Representatives and the Senate. It will go to a special committee. That committee will look at it. They'll study it. They'll figure out the implications of that bill, and then they will either stop it right there, or they will recommend it goes to the House of Representatives and the Senate. If they decide that it moves on to the House of Representatives and the Senate, then the House of Representatives and the Senate get to debate that bill, debate that what could be a potential law, and then eventually vote on it. If 50% of both the House of Representatives, or more than 50% of both the House of Representatives and the Senate, pass a law, it then goes to the president, and the president can sign that law into existence, or the president can veto it, which means to stop that law. They can say no to it. If the president says no, it then goes back to the House of Representatives and the Senate, where they can vote on it again and try to pass it. But in this case, instead of 50%, they need 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate to vote in order to pass that bill. It's not very common for a president's veto to be overridden, but it does happen occasionally, and you can see this nice little graphic over here. If it happens occasionally that the Senate and the legislative branch sometimes pass different versions of the same bill. So they're trying to pass the same law, but it comes out looking a little bit different. It will then go to a special committee that will then try to iron out the differences and bring that back before both of the houses in order to vote again on the adjusted bill. And that happens occasionally when they pass a different version of the bill. ultimately it affects our lives in a lot of ways. The legislative branch has a lot of control over our day-to-day lives. So think of all the laws that we live by. Think of all the laws that are part of our lives and how the legislative branch has had some sort of say in that. They serve as the voice of the people. They are the most closely connected to us. Our representative for Madison just represents the Madison area, and he brings the ideas of the Madison area before the nation. They can declare war. They can provide money where it's needed. They can impeach and remove federal officers. They can approve presidential appointments like the Supreme Court. They have a lot of say over how our country is run and our day-to-day lives. So it's important to pay attention to what the legislative branch is doing. And that's as far as we got on Thursday and Friday last week. So we talked about that, and then we began playing a Kahoot. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the executive branch, which we'll be talking about in our next class. Hope that made sense. If you have any questions, please contact me. Otherwise, have a great day.